video has found you, then perhaps you are someone who is starting to question your life, question the meaning of it all, questioning how reality works. And that can be very disconcerting, that can be very confusing, particularly if you're someone who has always dismissed the idea that there could be something more than simply the physical. And I was certainly one of those people. I was raised Catholic, having a religious background, but quickly rejected what I was being taught once I got to a certain age, really around sort of puberty, and could see all the contradictions within religion, and that what was being taught didn't make sense, just didn't resonate with me at all. And so for many years after that, I outright rejected the concept of spirituality, of the soul, and I clumped it all into the category of religion, and that it seemed to be nonsense to me. And it was only when I started to read up on concepts that didn't necessarily have the same religious indoctrination, these kind of rules about how things operated, and this concept that there was a God pulling the strings up, in this place called heaven, that I started to realize that I'd thrown out the concept of spirituality or a deeper meaning to life a bit quicker. And it wasn't really just the reading for me, it was that I had experiences that proved to me that there is something more. I couldn't dismiss it. And maybe you are someone who's having similar experiences right now and struggles to explain them, or does not know where to go with that. And just to give you a bit of background on my journey and where I'm coming from, I've labelled myself as the Soul Psych on my YouTube channel because I've worked as a psychologist since 2003. And it was really about 2004 that I first had my own spiritual experience that changed the way that I looked at life and really created this separation for me. Being the psychologist and being very focused on what made logical sense in science, and this other side that I couldn't deny, this metaphysical or non-physical truth that I'd sort of stumbled across and had to somewhat keep a secret or separate from my everyday work. And over the years, the gap between these two paths has slowly narrowed as people have opened their minds up, and humanity in general has been raising in consciousness. And so now I feel drawn to offer the best of what I've discovered from my work as a clinical psychologist working one-on-one with people, and what I've gathered both from my own learnings, my own experiences, years of meditation, to help bridge this gap. And there are many others out there that are doing the same, that are seeking to bridge the gap that has been there for a long time between science and spirituality. Although I'd also say that quantum physics has done wonders in bridging that gap as well. I might come back to that in a moment. But the first thing I wanted to say to you, if you are someone who is starting to question things and maybe having experiences that are pointing out to you that maybe there is something more going on here than just being physical bodies seeking to get comfortable in the world, make money, and then die, and that's it. It's pretty sad, really, if that's all that we're doing here. Simply meeting our physical needs, yes, having some experiences, maybe some fun experiences, varied experiences, yes, that can make life worthwhile. I'm not denying that that's a huge part of why we're here, having these varied experiences, but that it's not really going anywhere. The idea that maybe these experiences aren't contributing to anything deeper or bigger. And the conclusions that I've come to are that that's most definitely not the case, that we do not cease to exist once the physical body is laid to rest. But if you're someone that's still a bit on the fence or a bit confused, I could maybe point to a few experiences that might be challenging you and getting you to think a bit differently. For example, maybe you're having synchronistic experiences. Now, what's synchronicity? If you haven't come across that word before, it's so-called coincidences. These occurrences where things just seem to line up. You think about a person, they call you. You think about a person or you run into them. You have a dream and then something the next day, speaks to that dream. So synchronicity is our higher self, is levels of consciousness, whether you want to call it the universe, your higher self, seeking to communicate to you, to give you a bit of a nudge. And often, for a lot of people, that is where it starts, that these freaky coincidences start happening and you can't help but sit up and take notice. So maybe that's what's happening. Or maybe you are going through a dark night of the soul, an experience that is varying for different individuals, but it can certainly involve a very dark period of everything falling apart in your life, starting to question the way you're living life and your place in the world. And that dark night of the soul, again, is not by accident. It's not happening to cause suffering for you. It is a wake-up call. It is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to question life, to question the way that you're seeing the world and operating in the world, and remember. And I'll come back to that word again. Remember who you really are, because that is what we're here to do. Remember. We forget when we're born. When we come into the physical body, we forget. We forget what we are. We forget we're a soul. We forget all of that. And life is the process of remembering. And I might circle back to that point again a little bit later in this video. So, maybe you're having some very deep, dark experiences that are causing you to question everything. Maybe you are starting to realize that religion hasn't given you answers, but you still sense that there's something else. Maybe you are suddenly feeling drawn to meditation, to going internally and having some very interesting experiences when you turn internally. Maybe sensing things, experiencing a connection to the universe, to others, to humanity. Maybe your intuition is really going to another level where you seem to know something before it even happens. And that might be scaring you a bit. Or you might think it's really cool and you just don't know what it is. And so whether it's any of those or just thinking to yourself, there's got to be more. There's got to be more than just eat, sleep, work, repeat. Maybe look forward to the next holiday or fun activity and then start all over again. And my suggestion to you is that yes, there definitely is more. And so if I go back to my personal experience, that convinced me that there most definitely was something more going on in reality than just the physical. It was after reading a book called The Celestine Prophecy. It's a book that I'd still encourage anyone who hasn't had a lot of experience in the world of spirituality or metaphysics and is looking for a nice, easy intro to these sorts of concepts. Book that was written, I think, in the 90s by James Redfield, and it really just changed everything for me, because one of the concepts in particular, which was about connecting to nature or looking at nature in a way where there was this deep appreciation, and it didn't even have to be that there was a lot of beauty, such as amazing flowers or an amazing colourful sunset or something like that tends to appeal to most people, but much more subtle than that, just looking at nature in a way where everything could be appreciated as unique and one of a kind, and finding beauty in the very sort of mundane. Although I did have a bit of an advantage in the fact that I was living in London at the time, and the trees were going these beautiful golden oranges, browns, maroons, colours that I hadn't really encountered living in Australia in Sydney. And I was getting these unbelievable rushes of energy up my spine as I was connecting with nature, these kundalini surges, as I later discovered they're often referred to as. Energy moving up through the chakras from the base to the crown. And this wasn't just once, but for days on end. It wasn't simply a case that I could look at nature one day and then the next day it kind of lost its fascination, but I was getting these experiences day after day after day, and it was all the evidence I needed. It was all the proof. And then, certainly from that point on, really starting to pay attention to these so-called coincidences going on around me, and really starting to notice that they were not random, that these coincidences were nudges, were seeking to get my attention and help guide me on the path that I was supposed to be on. And a pretty cool, I guess, synchronicity or coincidence happened about 2/3 of the way through my career. So some years after I'd already started to look into to spirituality, to energy, to consciousness and how it all works, was when I was directed to, by the universe, I now see, my higher self, directing me to train in a particular therapy that was about accessing or working with the subconscious or unconscious mind to relieve or release trauma. And it was just interesting that I was looking for something that was more powerful than talk therapies. I kind of knew that the modalities that I was using with my clients, whilst they were helpful, weren't quite going far enough, weren't quite going deep enough into accessing all of the layers of our consciousness to help really make the powerful changes that people seek to make in life. And this particular training that popped up in my email that I usually would have dismissed outright, a therapy claiming to shift trauma in 3 sessions, I just would have dismissed it. And for some reason I followed up on this particular therapy. And whilst I wouldn't say everything about that therapy has made has held completely true as far as all the claims it made, there was certainly a significant proportion of the claims from the lady who created this particular approach that had levels of truth as far as how we could transcend our traumas and heal using approaches that are more experiential, going internal, having an experience more like a guided meditation type of experience. And so that has really then further progressed my merging of worlds in doing therapies that access these states of consciousness, which also align very beautifully with this concept of being guided by something far more intelligent and wise than my conscious analytical mind, which doesn't have all the answers. Far from it, in fact. It is just the tip of the iceberg. It is only a small part of my awareness, and we're unfortunately led to believe in society that with your mind and with willpower, etc., you can achieve anything. And that puts an enormous strain on our logical, analytical capacity, and it simply is setting us up for failure, really, because it's very hard to have the conscious mind overcome these deep patterns that we unconsciously took on, very early in life. But I digress slightly here in starting to talk about how to do the healing work on yourself, because this video is more about what to do now that you maybe are opening yourself up to understanding reality in a different kind of way. And so the first tip I would have for you is to trust your feeling and your intuition more so than your mind. I'm not saying that the conscious mind or the analytical mind does not serve us. Of course it serves us. It does many great things for us in terms of navigating us through our everyday lives. But as far as understanding what's going on in a spiritual awakening type of a situation, the analytical mind is out of its depth. And so using logic too heavily or dismissing things that just seem too far out there is only going to work against the process that is trying to unfold for you. The fact of the matter is, there are going to be beliefs, deeply held beliefs, that you locked in many years ago that feed this idea that that maybe this spirituality stuff, or that consciousness, the soul living on beyond death, etc., is not true, is not real. And so those beliefs are going to be hard to overcome at first. They're going to feed into your analytical thinking, and you'll just dismiss a lot of things out of hand if you let the conscious mind drive too strongly, have the driver's seat too much, so to speak. And so leaning into that feeling space a lot more, and trusting, people talk about trusting your gut. How do you do that? That is something that can be a little bit challenging, quite challenging to start with. What I still haven't necessarily mastered it myself, the difference between my mind and my gut being a very cognitive or analytical type person. So I'm certainly not trying to make that sound easy, but to at least start with acknowledging that your conscious mind is potentially going to push back against these other feelings, that there's something more, that your intuition is telling you a truth that maybe your conscious mind isn't ready to comprehend, or hasn't put a framework around it yet. And before I go further with maybe a little bit of information that might help the conscious mind settle a little bit, and maybe get on board with the process that you're going through, I would firstly like to say, before I go into that using your discernment, and if you haven't come across that word, discernment being your own trust in what feels right for you, is of utmost importance when seeking to open yourself up to spiritual or metaphysical concepts, because there is a lot of information out there, and even what you're getting from this video, take it or leave it. If it doesn't resonate, discard it. Any individual who tries to tell you that their way is the only way, and there's only one pathway to understanding yourself, consciousness, there's a set of rules, I'd be very wary of an individual like that, because there are many pathways, and the pathways that are truth, I guess, with a capital T, always direct you back to your own inner knowing. They do not place an individual on a pedestal to follow and bow down to. And so this video for me is not about placing myself at some position that is superior to you, but maybe someone who's just walked down the path a little further and has got some perspective to share. But certainly I've not mastered my process. I'm not sitting on top of a mountain in a state of enlightenment where I've nailed everything, and I'm just seeking to share what I've come to believe and understand so far in my journey. And I'm sure there's much more for me in my personal evolution, and making a video like this in 10 years' time will probably look a lot different to how it looks right now. But I'm going off where I'm at now, and hopefully supporting whoever's watching this video right now to move down the path that you're feeling called to move down. And so coming back to this appealing to the analytical mind or the conscious mind with a little bit of, I guess, common sense or evidence to help with moving through a pathway, or moving through a process of spiritual awakening, if that's what you're happy to call it. I would encourage you to look at quantum physics, because quantum physics is a powerful bridge between the old way, this very mechanical way of looking at how the world works, and I guess a more realistic truth of how things are actually working. And it really starts with going subatomic, so really going super small in how everything is made up. And if you look at how an atom of matter, so this physical stuff that we're made up of, if you take an atom of carbon or oxygen or any atom, and you go subatomic, so you look at what's going on inside that atom. And this is where it gets very interesting, that this thing that we traditionally assume to be a solid particle, kind of like Lego blocks being put together, is not. It's actually all empty space. There's this nucleus with protons and neutrons in the middle, and these electrons that aren't even moving around in an orbit like some early physicists proposed, that they were kind of moving around like in an orbit like the moon moves around the Earth. They're actually more like teleporting to different spots and don't hold necessarily one predictable space, these electrons that are around this nucleus. And that's been very much proven now. And so when you really start to look at it, everything that is physical matter is just energy in motion. So you hear lots of talk about everything's energy these days, and it seems a bit woo-woo when you hear people say that. But this is where quantum physics is coming in. It is true. Even if you watch that show, The Big Bang Theory, at the start, there's that symbol, and it's that symbol. Everything is actually majority empty space and is energy holding a certain vibrational frequency. When you take that a bit further and say, well, we know that microwaves exist, but we can't see them, and they exist outside of the spectrum of what we can interact with, and radio waves, X-rays, all of these frequencies of energies that we can't actually detect with our five senses, but we know they exist, then is it such a stretch to think that all matter, all physical stuff is the same kind of less than physical state, even though it obviously has a level of physicality to it because we can see it, we can interact with matter? And then, well, let's entertain maybe for a moment the idea that thoughts and feelings are energy also. And again, quantum physics and some of these breakthrough experiments have really done wonders in helping people to start to believe that a thought is actually affecting reality. Yes, we hear a lot about manifesting these days, and unfortunately it's been distorted, the true messages around how much our thoughts influence each individual experience we have, because it's a bit more complex than simply me having a thought now and creating that in my reality tomorrow morning. There's a lot more going on there, including unconscious beliefs and including unconscious, the collective unconscious as well. So there are many layers that are working to affect the reality that I am creating, that you are creating in this moment, rather than just the thought that I choose to have in this very moment right now. Also the past thoughts that I've had that are still out there creating the reality, as well as unconscious beliefs that are putting out an energy, etc. But let's just go back to the whole idea of thoughts affecting reality. The double-slit experiment is a pretty cool example of it. Very simple experiment where machine projected electrons, photons and electrons, it's been done with both, I should say, through a screen that has two slits in it, a metal screen, and on the other side of that is another screen that collects what makes it through the double slits, the two slits in the metal. And if these electrons or photons are traveling as particles, as we know, light can travel as a particle, and light can also travel as a wave. So if it's traveling in particle form, it's like shooting a bunch of little paintballs through those slots. So they're just all firing through like little particles, and the pattern on the screen at the end is two lines of imprint on the screen from the photons hitting the screen. If what's being emitted from the machine is in waveform, then it's like dropping two pebbles in a pond, and the ripples going out through the screen. And as the ripples go through the screen, the pattern on the back screen is far different than the two strips. It's a whole bunch of lines, so a very vastly different pattern depending on whether you've got particles or whether you've got waves as far as the photons being emitted. And here's the kicker. What determines whether or not you get the particle formation on the screen or the wave formation is whether there is an observer of what's going on or not. So if there's a person there or a camera, any kind of recording device, being it a human or a camera recording it, you will get the particle formation, the two lines. If there's no one there to observe it, it's waveform. So the conclusion that's drawn about this experiment, and it's been repeated over and over again, the double-slit experiment, you can go look it up, is that the act of perceiving, just being there to witness what's going on, is affecting the reality of the experiment. Just being the witness is affecting the reality and collapses those photons into particle form. Whereas without a witness there, they stay in waveform. And, it poses some interesting reflection from that old riddle. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, according to this kind of evidence, no. There's no sound unless there's someone there to receive it. Unless there's someone there to collect the sound, it stays as potential. So we are influencing our reality. There's other really amazing experiments that are also probably going even a bit further than that and showing more definitively what's going on, where they've done lots of experiments at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Again, you can go look these up. The Institute of Noetic Sciences, in fact, is an amazing resource for experimental data that proves that consciousness is not a result of neurons firing in the brain, that consciousness is beyond the brain, and it is being expressed beyond the body with a whole range of different experiments that are seen as paranormal or parapsychology, but the data is being collected for decades now to support these concepts. And one experiment that comes to mind is where they get individuals in a room that's protected from any electromagnetic radiation getting in and out, and they place an individual in another room, and the person who's in the protected room has the instructions of sending out an intention to the other person, sending thoughts out towards that person to influence them in some kind of way. I can't recall exactly what they're supposed to think about, but they're supposed to have thoughts about this individual. And this other individual's hooked up to skin conductance monitors and various other instrumentation, And as soon as the individual has the thought about the person in the other room, there's a change in the physiological responses. And as soon as they stop, it stops. There's no lag time. It's instantaneous. And so, to have data like that proving that someone's thoughts is affecting someone in another room, let alone the other amazing data that's been collected with people being able to remote view, so take their consciousness outside of their body and view things that is not in their physical space, and having data to prove that they have accurately witnessed something that they could never have seen in real life. They've never been to another country and able to report back on something that they've never experienced in their body. They've even done that with satellites, to my understanding, reading codes off satellites. So yes, the data is out there if you want to go looking around. Unfortunately, mainstream science has pushed this sort of data to the fringes. It hasn't known what to do with it. It has seen it as too out there, doesn't fit with the models that support this notion that we're just a mechanical, physical vehicle, kind of like a car with different parts that all move together and is fueled and with, food and water, and that's all we are, just these mechanical beings. Whereas the data's been there for years and years to support otherwise. And unfortunately, we just haven't had access to it in the mainstream, but people are waking up. And maybe you're one of them. And so go looking. It's all there. And my other piece of advice to you, or another piece of advice as far as helping you along the way, is start to turn inward, to meditate. Now, some people get the wrong idea about what meditating is all about, that somehow you've got to quieten your mind, go completely blank and be in this Zen, peaceful state where there's no thoughts at all. That is one potential outcome that happens at times when we turn inwards, that we find this peaceful state where the thoughts stop. But it is not the only experience that we have when turning inwards. And often early in meditative experiences, there are lots of thoughts coming in and parts of your personality that are trying to figure things out, etc. And so just observe, just be the curious observer, if that is your experience as you start to turn inwards. Just start to notice what sort of thoughts present, what sort of feelings present, and just allow them to be, and to be witnessed, and to be accepted. I'd also encourage you to look into internal family systems work. That's a model that is pretty widely used in psychology these days, and to me it is one of the most powerful models for accessing your unconscious aspects, these beliefs that you're holding on to, the wounds that are needing attention, and to help you connect with your core essence, your true self, your soul. Because that is what you really are. You are a soul. You're a soul that's condensed down into a physical experience as a body. You're not a body who has a soul. Your soul is far grander and more expansive, and is still connected to everything that there is now. It's never not connected to all that there is. It's just that there's this veil kind of cutting us off from that higher awareness. But it's still speaking to us all the time. And the more we start to listen, and that's through synchronicities, what comes to us in meditations, intuition, trusting it, leaning into it, following our passions, following the things that spark us up, that excite us, without an attachment of where that's going, but just following the breadcrumbs. And I'd also highly recommend Bashar's teachings if you haven't heard of Bashar. Yes, it's some out there stuff for an individual who's never believed in the process of channeling. But on that note, let me just quickly say, if we're actually connected to all that there is, that we're a soul, that we're a consciousness that's connected to all there is, then the fact that there could be individuals out there that are able to channel in consciousness that is not from Earth maybe isn't so wacky after all. I used to dismiss it as well back in the early days, but I think you're either all in or you're all out in this process, and I know it can be a little bit jarring at the start to open up to things that you just previously thought were just too crazy, too out there, conspiracy theories, whatever. And I realize that a lot of the things that I would talk to people about these days, like the existence of other beings, aliens, to a lot of people just seems wacky. But isn't it more wacky to think that we are the only beings in the entire multiverse? Anyway, I think if you stay tuned, the evidence around beings from other planets and civilizations is only going to increase. At the time that I'm recording this video in October 2025, I'm pretty sure by the end of 2026 it's all going to look a lot more obvious that it's not crazy conspiracy theories when we're talking about other species. Anyway, another slight digression there. But maybe I can finish with this. Why are you here? Why are we here? We came as a soul to have a physical experience as a human being and to have a very challenging experience as a human being, because as human beings we choose to forget who we are. We choose to have this experience where we completely forget that we're connected to everything, that we are a soul, that life does go on after the body is laid aside. That we choose to forget all of that so that we can have the experience of waking up to it, so that we can have the wonder, experience all of the polarity being world of opposites, as a way of finding our way back to remembering that we actually are all connected, that we are love at our core. We are unconditional love at our core. And you may have moments where you feel that, and then moments where you slip back into fear, or maybe you've kind of always known that. Maybe you look at people around you, though, in the world that don't seem to be connected to their unconditional love at all, and it doesn't mean that it's not there, it's just so well hidden. It's like a light globe that's on, but there's got so many layers of black tape over the top of it that it would appear that it's not on. So if you look at others in the world and go, well, they don't seem to be on a spiritual path, or they don't seem to be a soul or a loving consciousness, well, that's just where they're at in their journey, and they may not in this lifetime get to have the experience of waking up to their true essence. But you, if you're watching this, hopefully are. You get to have an experience as a human that's far more expansive and joyful and wondrous and conscious, in that you can choose to contribute to this collective experience of humanity and be one of the individuals that help bring in this new version, because it's happening. This new version of Earth is happening. The old version of Earth is probably still going to exist as well, that there'll be people that stay in that old way. Fear-based, conflict, separation. But there is going to be a whole lot more people waking up to the truth. That we are love, and that we're here to have extraordinary expansive experiences to feed back to source, to help the universe experience itself in all the myriad of different ways. And there's no puzzle piece in all of humanity that is the same as you. There's only one of you. There's only one you that can contribute to that collective experience of humanity in only the way you can. And that doesn't mean you have to be the best at something, or seeming to be unique by other people's standards, because there is no other you. There is no puzzle piece that can fit yours, your place in humanity. So I hope some of what I've said here has been a spark for you, has maybe been comforting. And I hope that you find your way on your journey. I'll also put some other books and suggestions in the description to help you on your path if you're hungry for more. Sending lots of love. We need more of you.